What is up, YouTube? How's everybody doing? This is Greg from GregsTutoringNYC at gmail.com. So I have a whole bunch of goodies today. In fact, my brain is just a big jumble based on it. I have a lot of scoring details to talk about, and a whole bunch of kind of different categories. And I want to kind of conglomerate it all in one space. I've been rushing, and I actually haven't had time to think this live stream through, so I hope it doesn't come out too confusing. Normally I prepare and I'm pretty meticulous about stuff. It's not to say that I don't understand the material, but it's kind of not a good starting place to where to talk about this. So let me start with this. First of all, I do a lot of tutoring for specialized tests, especially the SHSAT. Been doing it for years. It's kind of a consistent pattern that happens, which is that, first of all, people don't really know how the scoring works at all. And then there's a second group of people who kind of know how it works, but there's other parts to it that they don't. And the whole scoring mechanism and the way it kind of sets itself up becomes almost mythological, and it takes on a life of its own, and everybody starts passing around this kind of incomplete information. So what I want to try to do in this scope, in this live stream, is to try to just conglomerate it all together somehow, covering different aspects, which is what is the historical data from schools, what are the schools involved, what are they looking for in terms of their cutoffs, what's issues involving the discovery program, and what happens when you get a score. What does it really mean to get a certain score in a certain section? And how are they really combined together? Okay? And what I did was I wrote up a computer program to actually do everything I just said. It's a really, really wild program. And I just finished adding a piece onto it just a second ago before I did this. And that's what I've been spending the day on, which is to incorporate discovery into all this conversation somehow. Because as the week went on, I kept adding pieces onto it, pieces onto it. So first of all, I'd like to say, first of all, almost everything I'm about to say is really about the grade 8 SHSAT. The grade 9 SHSAT will also involve it, but since I don't have historical data based on the grade 9 SHSAT, it won't be there. But some of the other conversations will, like I'm about to talk about something called top-heavy scoring, and I'll explain what that means in a second. But almost when you see specific numbers, that's relating strictly to the grade 8 SHSAT, not for the grade 9 SHSAT, all right? So I just mentioned top-heavy fractions. So what is that, okay? Not top-heavy fractions, top-heavy scoring. So hello, how you doing? So what happens is when you take a normal test in school, it's normally graded from 1 to 100, or if you have a rubric, it's graded from 1 to 5, and sometimes it's split even further. Like your New York State test has, like, you can get a 4.1 and a 4.2 on it and things like that. So the SHSAT basically has an alleged top score of 800, and it's broken up into two sections, 400 points for the ELA and 400 points for the math. So one myth is that your top score is 800, but the truth is, as far as I know, nobody has ever gotten an 800 on the SHSAT. You can get about 700. So there's that last 100 that the Department of Education never really explains, because this whole process, and part of what I'm about to explain to you, is really shrouded in mystery and secrecy, and we have to look at the SHSAT and the scoring as this magic black box that we chuck stuff at, which is your answers, and they chuck something back at you, which is your score. And what normally happens is kids think, oh, I did so well, and wait a second, I missed the cutoff score. How did that happen? So I want to kind of resolve some of that right now today in the next hour. I started the scope late because YouTube and its wonderful wisdom wouldn't let me on for 10 minutes, but so here we are. So the top-heavy aspect is that somebody discovered a few years ago that because each section is scored independently and then added together, right, that if you ace one section, either the ELA or the math, it doesn't matter which, that you don't need to do as well on the other subject. So technically that means if you were to ace the math completely, So currently, there used to be 50 questions and you used to have A, B, C, D, E choices, 5 choices. Now there's 47 questions in each section, right? That get scored. There's 57 questions, so there's 10 field questions in each section. So 47 questions get scored. If you happen to get them all right in one section, then the argument is you don't need to get as many right in the other section. So that's what top-heavy scoring talks about. Because people notice that if, for argument's sake, you got 100% in the math and maybe 70% in the English, whatever 170% happen to map it to, because the SHSAT is not done percentage-wise. It's done by giving giving certain amount of points to each question you answer correctly. But if you got 100% on one and 80, say 80 on one, is that better than getting like 90 in both sections? Okay? Because you could argue if you got 90 in both sections and you got versus 100 versus say 70, you actually did better getting 90 in both. But your score may end up being lower. All right? So that's an anomaly of the SHSAT. And all standardized tests, even the New York State test, has weird attributes to them involving how they're scored, how the ranking happens, a whole bunch of different stuff. So this is the anomalies and the weirdness to the SHSAT, how it's scored. Now, I'm not going to go through some of that in detail. Other YouTubers have done it exceptionally well, so I'm not going to repeat that information. But let me see. I just lost my train of thought. So that's the deal. So what I have is I wrote a program, and it's called SHSAT. So the SHSAT has a whole bunch of aspects to it. So it should be coming up on your screen now. I'm going to give a slight delay to make sure it is, because if it's not, the rest of the talk is wasteful. Because I actually have real data that I'm using here. So here's what I did. I got some SHSAT data and I basically metabolized it. And what I do is, based on 2 sample scores, which is your math and ELA, I'm going to output predictions on what your SHSAT score is going to be. Now, there's a couple of issues here, which is that the SHSAT's based on a curve, and there's actually more than one curve. In fact, there's at least 2 of them, and perhaps more than 2. One curve metabolizes the SHSAT across all forms when the test is given. A lot of kids think there's only one SHSAT, but it turns out every year there's about 18 or more of them, based on your location, based on your time, based on the day you take it as well. So there's actually the SHSAT's given about a dozen times. So there's at least one form for each instance of that, okay? So there's that too. So you can't even say I got a 300 on the SHSAT, because it's really asking which SHSAT did you get it on. So what they do is they statistically average all the SHSATs out. Because I hear kids come out, oh, I'm annoyed, my test was easy, or my test was hard. Yesterday they had an easy test. It doesn't matter. They're statistically metabolized. So that's one reason why we can't say what exactly the score is. Plus, they change it from year to year. There's also a curve applied to the SHSAT, which is once they metabolize everybody's scores, then they try to figure out how many kids are actually going to, they tweak a whole bunch of numbers. You know, we like to think it's round robin where whoever gets ranked the top gets in first and so on. And that's true. There's nothing going wrong with that. But they can tweak numbers, especially when it gets into who can enter the discovery program and other things like that. Because what happens is a whole bunch of kids who end up right at the cutoff score, okay? And a kid who gets 2 more questions answered, they get in. And a kid who doesn't get 2 more, they don't. Whereas on other tests, they do what they call percentiles. If you're like in the 80th percentile, which means like you get from 80% to 90% right, you're lumped all in the same group. The SHSAT doesn't do that. It's literally score by score by scores by score by score by score. So it's going rank order, okay, and it's going to determine who gets the next shot at picking their high schools based on the priority list you wrote out when you took the SHSAT, right? Now currently you're enrolled through My Schools at NYCs, but you don't put the schools down. You only put your regular non-specialized high schools down on My Schools at NYC, okay? But on the actual, when you take the test, you're going to bubble in your priority of schools, your special high schools only, specialized high schools only here, all right? So there's another issue too, which is that the more questions you answer, the SHSAT handbook has a little odd wording in it if you actually read it, which is basically says is each question you answer right is worth the same amount of points. And then it goes on to talk about, just real briefly, about the curves that happen, right? The statistical maneuverings they do to it. And the truth of the matter is, when that happens, the questions are not all equal. So what normally happens is, and by the way, this is it. So I'm going to show you, tell you right now, a cheap way to calculate how to predict your score. Okay? So here's what you want to do is, when you get to the 20th question, on average, the SHSAT is worth about 200 points. So that means up until that point, each question was worth about 10 points. Okay? The next 20 questions are about worth 4 points each. So if you got 30 right, what you're going to do is take 200, because that's the original 20, and add on 10 times 4, or 40, to get 340, if I did that right in my head, right? So the first 20 questions, they're not all worth 10 points, but if you get to the 20th question, you would have achieved a score of 200, okay? So if you get to 30, you're going to add 4 points for each of those on top of that. And then what are you going to do from the 40 to the 47th question? Again, you're going to have to do 57 questions, but 10 are thrown away. And the DOE calls them field questions, but we don't know if they determine the field questions before you take the test or after you take the test. This is really important, and it's unfair that they don't reveal that kind of information. But in any event, once you get to question 40, what I like to do, because this is back of the envelope computation, is just start adding. One way to do it is just go 5, 7, 9, 11, 13. So 41 would be 5 more. 42 would be 7 more. 43 would be 9 more. 44 would be 11 more. Okay, there's a couple ways to do this. I figured out a few models here. One is to just also do it 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay? Because at the end of the day, if you got 47 questions right, you don't have a worry in the world, so it kind of doesn't matter. And by the way, the thing with the 20 questions being worth 200 points, that's the same idea. If you don't get 20 questions right in a certain section, you're not going to get into any specialized high school. Okay? So that's a critical kind of aspect. So we don't care exactly how the scoring is done before question 20. It's just that once you get to answer 20 questions, you have 200 points. So if it's not clear, the number of questions you answer correctly, the more you answer correctly, the more points you get after question number 40. So again, the first 20 questions are worth 10 points. The next 20 questions are worth 4 points each on average, people. Again, I preface this by saying it changes from year to year. They apply a curve to it. So in some years it could be 3.5 points, and some years it could be 4.2 points, but on average. And then after that, just go 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, there's a couple models I have to do this. Some predict it better than the others. Because what you have to do is go after the test and try to work backwards on how they calculated some of this. All right? And I used a whole bunch of samples that I kind of metabolized across them to get data. So that's the cheap way to do it. All right? So I actually wrote a program using some past real data that we're going to use to compute some of this. All right? But again, if you want to compute your own score based on 47 points, not on the 57. So this is when you know that how many that you got correct. Okay? When it's based on 57, you don't know how many you got correct. And that needs to be clear to everybody. You don't know because 10 of them are field questions, and you don't know which of the 10 is the ones you got right or not. So what you have to do is do your own statistical averaging. All right? So that's part of what I want to talk about next. So let me, again, we have the sample, so you should be seeing that on the side. I see it came up. So what I want to do is SHSAT me. So if I got, for instance, 47 on both parts of the test, if you notice the numbers here, it's giving me 99%. So I have 3 models I'm using to predict the score here. Model number 1, if I get 47 in both sections, it's telling me I got 315 on the math and 310 on the ELA for a composite score of 625. Okay, that seems too low, but I'm using it because it's conservative. Because you don't want to overinflate the numbers, because again, we don't know exactly what they are. And if you overinflate them and you end up getting maybe 40 right in each section, you might think you got a higher score than you actually got. So that's really the premise of my model number 1, okay? My model number 2 is a little more realistic, which is that if you got 47%, then you got 100%, you got 345 on the math, and you got 342 on the ELA, for a composite score of 687. So that's closer to that 700 unicorn score I was talking about earlier. Okay? All right? And then the third model is based on a SHSAT when it used to have 50 points in it. Right? Instead of 47, it had 50. So what's going to happen is it's bumping up a little. So if you notice, that score reaches 730. So what we have here is a low-end estimate, which is clearly too low, of 625, and a high-end estimate, which is probably a smidgen too high at 730. That's a whole 100-point swing. Okay? So what we may want to argue is, well, let's meet the midpoint, 50 through it. So that would give 675, which is really the model number 2. So that's why the model number 2 often works, and it's often the one to go for here. All right? So, so if everybody's with me now, so for argument's sake, if you got 33 right in both sections, you would be getting about a 500 score. So if you see on the right-hand side, the composite numbers, and I typed in 33 for math and 33 for English. So if you did both of those, okay, then you're going to get about a 500. In a whole bunch of specialized high schools, that's a score to get you in. Okay, and I'm going to get to that later. And in fact, let me just show it now, because that's another part of this. So another aspect of this program is to print out historical data from past years of the different specialized high schools. So if we look across here, this is the data from 2012. The first column. The second column is 2013. The next one's 2014. Now in 2014, I have the cutoff score for 2012 and 13. That's the cutoff. For 2014, it's the cutoff slash the high score. Okay? So for Stuyvesant in 2014, 559 was the cutoff. For 2018, which is the last one, these are all October scores. Okay? So when I say 2018, I'm talking about the SHSAT that was taken in grade 8 in October 2018. So then this cutoff score was 559, and the high score for Stuyvesant was 698. So if you look down and up at those columns, that was the high score. There was a whole bunch there that were maybe 650-ish if you averaged them off. Okay? And you can see that. And if I also have another option here, whoops. So I also have another option where I present each school's data going up and downwards, so that you can see it not only going across, but also up and down, so that you could just look straight down there. You see 2012, 13, 14, up to 18. And if you look straight down, you have 562, 562, 559, 555, 554, 555. So Stuyvesant's historical data is saying that it's about 550 to 560 each year. And its top score normally teeters around 700. All right? So if you want to get in Stuyvesant, and if we do that 33 number again here, if we go back to here, then that's 500. So you are not getting into Stuyvesant based on 33. Again, using historical data. All right? So again, I used historical data, which we know we can't use it exactly. Then if you're looking at the tables I just spit out on the screen, it changes from year to year. So we can only use those to do a prediction for next year's information. Probably it's going to be about the same, but we can't use an exact number. So we can't say Stuyvesant's going to be 555 again next year. We don't know. It might be 550. It might be 540. It could also be 570. We don't know. And the same goes for this 33 stuff. I have some models that I pass it through, but we don't know if this year that 33 in the math will produce a 248. We don't know. We don't have a clue. It could produce 240. It could produce 260. It could produce 230. It depends, again, how they do all the curves. So all we're talking about is averaging here. I'm trying to get a median and a mean and some statistical significance out of this. Realizing that there's a delta here. There's a whole bunch of wiggle room here. And I think this is an aspect that people don't really follow or understand when they're doing their predictions of their scores and so on. All right? And this is critical. It's too easy, again, to think, oh, I got 40 right, I'm in. No, you're not. Okay? And I'm not trying to do this to scare everybody or anything like that. But I want it to be realistic because there's so many students I hear afterwards. I don't know what happened. Oh, we went to this center. We used this tutor. What happened? You need to be one with the numbers. It's because you didn't understand what you're doing and your preparation. And that's one reason why I'm doing this here is that you need to incorporate some of these aspects into your prep so that you know what you're doing with that. And I'm showing you real numbers. Even though I'm telling you let me even say there's 10% error in everything I'm showing you here. Okay? But this is using past real numbers. Okay? So let's get back to the top heavy thing. So with that in mind, if you got a 57 in the math and a 0 on the English, here's what my model is predicting that's going to happen. So if you got a 47 on the math, you're going to get about it looks like you're going to get about a 350 or a 340 if you average out those last three numbers, the 315, the 366, and the 385. So depending on how the model goes, you could end up with a 385. Okay? The question is, does that help you? Because if we look at here, right? This is the historical data again. If we look in this column here, I can't get a column right, but this column down, let's say, if you're getting a 47 or 0, none of these come close to 315. So here's what we're going to do. We're gonna try random numbers. Let's say you got 47 in the math and 20 in the ELA. So now you're at 490. Okay? Which you passed Brooklyn Latin, because Brooklyn Latin had a 483 last year. And Brooklyn Tech started at 493. So that would be your scenario. That if you got a perfect score in the math, you would need at least 20 on the ELA. Here's the numbers, dudes. It's not lying. So this is what we need to do when I did my own averaging of all this stuff. Okay? So this is what we need to contemplate and figure out. So this is under the assumption that you get a perfect score in the math. Okay? We can also flip that. So let's say you got 20 in the math and 47 in the ELA. So now you would have a slightly higher score. You would already be busting 500 in all the models I have. So you would definitely get into Tech and Brooklyn Latin that way. Okay? So this is the kind of numbers and the kind of things you want to play with. Otherwise, you're just throwing dots at a wall blindfolded behind your back. And yes, there's cheap ways to figure this out too, which is basically like, if you're getting half the answers right, and let's just do that. So if you get half the answers right, so that would be 47 divided by 2 is 23 and 24, let's say, right? Because that's half of each. That would be your score. You would have about a 410. A 410 to a 450 would be your score if you got half the questions right. Right? Do you guys see where I'm heading off here too? Right? It's an interesting quandary here. And I'm using the actual raw numbers and the real numbers. Yeah, hiya, boss. No, it's the numbers I'm showing are only 8th grade numbers. Although some of the topic is specific to 9th grade. But when I actually show real numbers here, it's only 8th grade numbers. Realize that the 9th grade numbers are normally about 50 points higher than the 8th grade numbers. Okay? So that's something to figure out as well. That if you're trying to shoot for a target using some of the numbers I'm showing you guys, that would be the case. All right? So so the question is, so I did the extreme of the 47-0, right? Let me put it in. That's your 47-0. Perfect math gives that. If it was perfect ELA, that would be it. So the question is, what's the score we need? Because I just did the 23-24 one. Well, they balanced out. So how about I just keep bumping those up? Let's say it's 27 each. Like, what would be your average to finally get somewhere? So let me just keep adding 1 to each of these. Okay? So we get one of the models is getting close to 490. So 29, 29. That's four. So that busted 483 because if we go back to Brooklyn Latin, right? Brooklyn Latin had a 483 there. So that one model at the 29 is busting Brooklyn Latin. So let's go to 30 and see if we can meet Brooklyn Tech that way. So 30 brings us to 495 on the one model. That is Brooklyn Tech. But if you notice, the one model is still 460. And even so for, that would even be so for Latin. So let's try 31. So we're still at 460. The one model broke 500. So 32. Again, the 2 models are there now for both Brooklyn Tech and Brooklyn Latin. So let's go 33 just because you want to make sure. Okay, so you're almost there. And 34 is probably going to meet in all of them. No, it still doesn't. So 35. Okay, so now you've met every school at 35. So this is another way to perspective and view it. That if you get 35 questions right in both sections, you have a good enough score. So 44 out of 47 is a good score. So let's do that. So you're asking about that as well. So what did you say, 44? So if you get both 44, that's your numbers are going to be over here. Or that 567, the 613. So yes, that would get you into, so if we go back to here, what would 567 and above get you in? It would get you into all the schools, including Stuyvesant. Okay, so 44 in both sections is right. Okay. Is everybody with me so far? Does anybody have any questions about what I'm talking about? Hello, Anish, how you doing? Because this can get deep and complicated and confusing. And I have more. This is not all I want to say. All right? So if everybody's good with that, I'm going to do a slight spin-off of what ABOS just presented. And this is so this is where it gets mind-blowing. So if you got 44 out of 47, I just showed you the scores for that. But the problem is, the SHSAT doesn't have 47 questions, it has 57. Okay? So what we're talking about is that you would have gotten 88 out of 114. And now look at what I show you guys. I pound out a whole bunch of models. And this has to happen. The problem is that 40... Hey, Leo, how you doing? I have a question. Yeah, what's your question? Go ahead. So the problem is, if you get 30 right in each section, yes, what will be your score? Okay, let me pound that. And I did that a second ago. So the 3 numbers that are the right, the 460, the 495, and the 478. So your average there would probably be about 475. So that would not be good enough to get into any specialized high school if you got 30 in both sections. because that would be this here. And none of these numbers in this column will meet that. The lowest is Brooklyn Latin. So if you answered maybe 2 more questions, you might be able to squeak by. And that's the numbers we just did. So what did I come up with? You needed 35 in both to meet it, I think, yes. So 30 in each section is no good. You need at least 35 in each section to get it. But remember too, 40 will get you into a whole bunch of them. So remember too that it's each section. So here's the 41. Your average there is about, you know what, I should have added a column to actually average the last 3 numbers there. That average looks like it's about 540. So that would get you into, if we look here, that would probably get you into every school except for Stuyvesant, if you got 40 right on each section. All right, so you see how cool this is, guys? I mean, I'm pretty excited about this. So is everybody on level there? Because I want to talk about another aspect, which is really gets screwed up. All right, because it's not good enough to just say you got 40 right. That's the problem. Or in ABOS's case, it's not good enough to just say you got 44 right. Okay, so let me bring that up again. Let me run that. So if we do, in other words, if you got 88 out of the 114, if you got 44 in your section, and there's 114 questions, including the field questions. Here's, if you look at that whole right side now, down the whole page, that's all the possible scores. So if we look at them, the top one seems to be, let's see, 615, no, 655. $655 might be the top one, but the lowest one, I think, is $484. So what? How could that happen? What is he talking about? There's a whole 100-point range there right now. That on the top one, you pretty much got into every school, and on the bottom one, you got into none of them. Right? Let me repeat that again. If you got 44 on each section, or at least you think you did, and you add it up to 88, so it's 88 out of 114 questions. That runs the whole complete full gamut. That you can either get into every high school or no high schools. And why is that so? It's so because of the field questions. Because it may turn out that you got all the field questions right, but none of the non-field, 10 of the non-field questions you got wrong. And therein lies the death and the problem of this. And that's what all those numbers are about there, all the different models. So if we go to a midpoint, which is going to be the 484 plus about 50, let's assume you got half the field questions right. Which means that now you don't have 10 wrong out of the 47 because you thought it may have been 37. Right here, to make it clear, here's the problem. If you got if you got a 47 and 10 of those are the field questions, and 10 of the non-field questions you got wrong, then you actually only got 37 right and not 47 right. Right? There's scorable points and non-scorable questions. All your answers are not scorable because they throw 10 of them away. And the problem is you don't know which of those 10 there are. They don't tell you. In fact, we don't even know if they throw them away after the fact. They may do a statistical analysis on the whole SHSAT and say, you know what? Everybody got question 40 right. Let's throw away question 40. And then they say, oh, by the way, that's one of the 10 field questions. Like, say what? And they have perfect opportunity to do that because they never described how it's done. So here we are. And that's what that whole page of information that you're seeing on the screen is about. So remember, it's out of 114 questions. So we just showed ABOS that 44 out of 47 was good. The question is, what does 44 out of 57 mean? That's where I got the 88 out of 114. Again, I'm going to say it. 44 out of 47 is excellent. But is 44 out of 57 excellent? We don't know because there's 10 mysterious questions in there. And we don't know which ones you got right and which ones you got wrong. Because when it's 44 out of 47, you only got 3 wrong. That's excellent. But it's when it's 44 out of 57, we don't know what it means. And you could argue, wait, Greg, I got some of the field questions right. The problem is we don't know which ones those are. So that's what all my numbers on the screen are talking about. That's why they're going all across the board. And the problem is they go completely across the board, from not getting into any specialized high school to getting into all of them, depending on which field questions are actually field questions, and depending on which non-field questions you got right or not out of that 114. Because remember, if you got 88 out of 114, that means you got 24 wrong or something. Or 26 wrong, I believe. That's a lot to get wrong. So we don't know which questions they're grading. And here's the quandary. So this is why this is a lot of mythology, a lot of confusing, especially after kids take the test. Oh, I did excellent. The passages were great. I excelled in the math part. And boom, you come out the other side not knowing what happened. Almost like you got whacked. So when you're doing your preparation, whether you're doing it yourself, whether you're going to a center, whether you're going to a great tutor like me, you need to consider this. Not just doing problem after problem after problem after problem, and not just figuring out your strengths and weaknesses, and not just timing yourself to figure out your pacing, but this is just as important. Because this is an illusion. It looks like getting 44 out of 47 is good, but that's not how the test is scored. You don't get 44 out of 47. You get 44 out of 57. And therein lies the huge problem. Okay? Is everybody good with that? Anybody have any questions? Because I want to be clear. I've repeated this now about 3 times. But I want to make sure everybody knows what I'm talking about. And I have the data here. I can give other examples if anybody needs them, demonstrating what I'm talking about. So there's kind of 2 gradings that happen. One is out of 47, and the other is out of 57, or 114 when you add the both parts together. How much questions are not scored? 10 in each section, which is a lot. So if there's 57 questions and 10 are not scored, that's like 15% of the questions are not scored. That's a lot. And that's where the problem, that's why I'm getting all excited, and I'm happy I have this program to actually prove it finally. That's a big room of error. That's a big margin of error. And it's not even your faults. It's just the way the test is done. But that's how a super smart kid can walk out of the test and not meet a cutoff score. And that's why it's more important to make sure your prep is done exactly right. Again, from a wonderful tutor like me. So, any other questions, guys? Because there's other parts to this I want to show as well. There's other aspects to this program I have. Let me just say, I wrote down some notes, so I want to make sure I covered everything. Scoring, there's no guarantee, so again, there's a lot of wiggle there. Is this accurate? No, it can't be. It can't be accurate. That's what I. Oh, I don't think you were in the beginning of the scope when I started it. It can't be because the numbers change every year, and it also can't be because you can only use historical data, and it also can't be because the DOE keeps it a secret. So not only is there room for error, the 15% I just talked about there, but there's also that whammy on top of it. So there's a lot of room for error here, which is another reason to get it even more questions right. Because we don't know. We don't have this data. We don't have this information. So the data I'm showing on the screen is the best we can do using this historical information. And by the way, you have 3 or 4 levels of historical data in the program. Because I'm not just working off cutoff scores. I'm also working with actual raw data based on what each question number gave a certain number of points and stuff like that. And by the way, if anybody has so this is a part where I need your help, everybody, and I should have mentioned this up front. I would like to add more data to this program to make it more accurate, or at least to give other models. So if anybody has cutoff score data, whether they got it from a tutoring center or whatever, throw it to me, email it to me. I'm GregsTutoringNYC@gmail.com. because I would like to make this, if not more accurate, at least more adaptable to what the scenario actually is occurring. And so there's a big delta here. There's a big wiggle room. All right. So let me just see what I wrote down here. Past scores, where do you fit in? Examples, going to the extremes. Minimum joint numbers. So we basically got the 47 versus whatever for the math or whatever. I heard the last question of each section had the most points. No, that's not true. Not on the SHSAT. It's true for other tests, but not the SHSAT. Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's true, but maybe not the way you're thinking it is. So you get points based on the number of questions you answer right. So if you answer 40 questions right, the next they might be worth 4 points each at that point. The next question you answer might be worth 6 points. But that doesn't mean question 1 through 40. It means 40 answered correctly. So I originally read your comment as question number 57 was worth the most. No, it's not. But if you answer, the more questions you answer, theoretically, the more points they're worth each. So that's the model. I don't know if you caught this from the beginning, but like there's some models where the last question number 47, if you answer 46 questions right, there's some models saying that last question is worth 15 points. Right? Some earlier questions are only worth 4 points. There's also some models that say if you answer all the questions right in a section, that the 47th question is worth 50 points, 50. No, it doesn't work that way. They're not. Other tests do it that way, but the SHSAT doesn't do hard questions versus easy questions. It's only based on the number of questions you answer at the current point. So what happens is the first few questions are worth nothing. Then they're worth about 10 points each, and then they become worth 3 to 4 or 5 points each. And again, if you look at my cheap scoring that I did earlier, that's what that conversation was about. And then at a certain point, basically after question 39 or 40, again, it depends on the year and how they do the curve. But basically after question 40, they start being worth more. And they could be worth 10, 12, 15. And like I said, there's some models where the last question number 47, or the 47th question you answer right is worth 50 points. So, all right. Any other kind of questions like that? Because I want to show you guys some other data. So there's also discovery. So I'm going to add discovery into this. So what I did was, from this and the previous one, I threw away the left-hand column, which was the year 2012, and I added in the column here. See that 471? So that's the score ranges from last year for the discovery program. So if you don't meet a cutoff, some kids get a second shot at this. But there's certain rules you have to follow. You have to come from a poor school and be poor yourself, and a few other things. You could be English language learner and things like that. So there's a couple of rules involved here. So because what happens is a lot of kids' scores are right at the cutoff score for each school. So let's say the cutoff score for Brooklyn Tech was 493. So if you look at the table I just spit out, so Tech would be down here. So if you got from a 461 to a 485, you might be eligible to go into the discovery program to get into Brooklyn Tech that way. And what that means is you take a summer class, which is rigorous in its own right. So right, the cutoff score for Brooklyn Tech was up here, the 493. I'm highlighting it. But if you get from 481 to 485, you might be able to get into Tech that way. There's a whole bunch of rules involving that, but that's the deal with that. I also have on here the seat eligibility. That's what this column is here. And when you do your school choice, this is one of the things you want to pick. So you see that column with the 999s? Okay, the first column, like the 850 for Stuyvesant, that's the number of ninth graders they'll accept. So Tech accepts 1,500 ninth graders. And the second 999, actually I should have made that 888 and 999. I'll change that. But the second number is for the incoming 10th graders. So there's only 10 seats normally available at Stuyvesant for 10th graders to enter. At Brooklyn Tech has the largest for incoming 10th graders. It's 35 kids. All right? But Brooklyn Tech has the largest school. And by the way, that's one of the reverse reasons why Brooklyn Tech's score is so low. Because if you notice, their top score, their high score is pretty good. Because you could argue Stuyvesant only has smart kids in it. They have to get 559 and above. First of all, that's faulty logic for a number of reasons. But Brooklyn Tech also has a whole bunch of 559 kids. So do some of these other schools. It doesn't mean they don't have them. It just means it's the bottom. And what happens is when you do the application, it's done in rank order. So if you got the top SHSAT score of any kid, you're given the first shot at picking your school, and they're going to use it from your bubble sheet. So if you said Stuyvesant was your first choice, then they're going to try to give you Stuyvesant if there's a seat available there. If there is one, you got it. And it round robins that way, going through the top kid. Whatever the next top kid is, you get the next seat if it's available in your top choice. If it's not available in your top choice, they go to your second choice. If not your second choice, they go to your third choice. And that's how the schools get filled up. So it could be that you don't get a seat that way, even though you had a thing, because of the way you prioritized your list. So that's another aspect to getting into a school that has nothing really at all to do with your studying, your prep or anything. It just has to be with doing the priority list correctly. And again, this is only determined by you, the students. Your parents don't do the priority list. You and your family do it on my schools, that NYC, for the non-specialized schools. But for the specialized schools, you must bubble sheet them in correctly. And if you don't get into any specialized schools. If you screw up your bubble sheet and do your priority list order wrong, then you're not going to get in a specialized high school. Okay? And by the way, the discovery rules work the same way. You can't get into a discovery school that you didn't originally bubble in. Okay, so you don't have that opportunity. There's a whole bunch of different rules. I don't want to get into the minutiae of it all right here, right now. All right, so let me see if I have anything left on my list. I think we covered everything I really wanted to. And again, I'm going to keep adapting this program. So if you guys have any cutoff score data that you have anywhere, please make a legible copy of it with me somehow and email it to me, attach it to me somehow. All right, so let me see, we have that. And by the way, you want to use your seat availability to juggle this back and forth too. And by the way, when we talk about the grade 9 SHSAT, if you look at something like Lehman, there's only two grade 9 seats available there. So Lehman's hard enough to get into because there's only 100 seats normally anyway. So it's a teeny tiny school. So you want to figure out and play with some of these numbers as well. Not just the historical data on the scores, but also the seat count. Like one of the great things about Brooklyn Tech is that there's so many seats available. Okay, and these are all great schools. I read so much stuff about Brooklyn, Latin sucks, and Tech is horrible and stuff. You're all on drugs. Those are silly comments. These 8 schools are some of the top schools in the country. It doesn't mean they're the top schools in the country. There's a whole bunch of specialized high schools through the whole country, including other ones in New York City. Some are better, some are worse, some are equal. These just happen to have a specialized high school admissions test that you need to take to get into it. Okay? They're all good schools. There's no specialized high school that sucks. And anybody who thinks so, I don't know what you're talking about. All right? Let's see. Yeah, so that's everything I think I wanted to cover. So if you guys have any other questions, please ask them. Again, I'm Greg from GregsTutoringNYC at gmail.com. I think I have data here that I've never seen before. And nobody's ever done this analysis, or if they did, they never revealed it. And I have a program. I want to build it up. I want to make it, maybe make it even more accurate, or at least more adaptable to all the different scenarios based about scoring. And I hope what I'm saying about the scoring is clear, that the numbers are not what they appear to be. And saying you're getting 40 out of 47 correct in a section is very, very, very misleading, because it may not be good enough. And if you replay it, you can see the various different choices I used for those numbers. Okay. Anybody have any other questions? And I'm going to use this now for my own students. It's something I've been procrastinating about writing for years. And these are the numbers. And I wouldn't mind getting additional numbers to bounce it off of. And not just cutoff score data from tutoring centers, which are artificial and made up in a lot of cases, and often exactly wrong. Some of them still based on a 50-point score. And there's no 50-point score anymore, because there's no 50-point SHSATs anymore. So we want something accurate, especially based on anybody. There's always studies and stuff coming out and things like that. Not always, but often enough. All right, anybody else have any other questions? Again, please don't hesitate to email me, guys, about this or any other topics. And on other days, we'll get back to doing actual questions and answers kind of stuff. And peace out. One last thing, please like and please subscribe. Thank you, guys.